It's time now to check in with the latest from the World Economic Forum. And today, U.S. President Donald Trump landed in the snowy summit. His message of America first, though, is running contrary to the push for more globalization and free trade pitched by the EU. Our business editor, Kate Booty, is standing by with more. Kate, over to you.
Hi, Jeannie. Well, as you said, Donald Trump is on his way now to the World Economic Forum, which it's worth noting he never actually attended as a business tycoon. It's only now that he's the American president that he's actually been invited. Here, of course, the focus has been on globalization, and that America First policy that both he and his administration have been pushing rubs very much against the grain. We've heard one advisor seeking to clarify what that means, saying that from his point of view, it's not about America alone. It's about the U.S. as part of the broader world economy. Now, we've heard a few different definitions and defenses of those protectionist policies from the U.S. delegation over the past few days. So it'll be interesting to see what nuance the American president himself will actually give it in his speech on Friday. Now, to get some perspective on the week's events, I'm pleased to be joined by Badr Jafar, the CEO of Crescent Enterprises based in the United Arab Emirates. As a global businessman yourself, what's your take on the message that Donald Trump is pushing here?
So look, I think it's fair to say that on this mountain, as well as many other parts of the world, there are a fair few Trumpaholics, people perhaps overly obsessed with what Trump's going to say, what he's not going to say, what he's going to tweet, what he's not going to tweet. I'm not personally one of them, but I think what's fair to say that his message is, broadly speaking, from an economic perspective, pro-business, not too dissimilar to President Macron's. The big question, though, I think that we're struggling with and grappling with, not just on this mountain, but everywhere, is the economic growth and the investment that's supposed to be generated to generate that economic growth going to be broad-based? Is it to benefit just a few, like those on this mountain, including myself, or broader-based? But there's a wider issue at play here, and that's again, so I take a Middle East perspective. I think there's been an over-reliance on government to try and address the various challenges that we face. I mean, the Middle East today is faced with many challenges. There's a socio-economic crisis with youth unemployment going through the roof. It's close to 40% in some parts of the region. Of course, we have a sectarian crisis, which is leading to more conflict. We have a humanitarian crisis. I think 2/3 of the world's current humanitarian crises are within the Middle East and North Africa. And government doesn't have all the solutions, nor can they address all the challenges. So it's really an opportunity, and I think this is slowly dawning on businesses, and a responsibility, but also an opportunity to step up and be part of that solution. And I think there are a number of ways that businesses can be proactively involved in generating solutions.
One of the key words that we hear a lot here is this idea of inclusive growth. Is that something that the American president perhaps doesn't believe in either?
Look, again, whether or not President Trump believes in that or not, again, as far as I'm concerned, is neither here nor there, because it's about the business's role. And that's where I think the missing gap is right now. Look, policies are very important, and therefore governments creating that enabling environment to help businesses spur action is important. But ultimately the action, the business itself, needs to be done by business. So, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and, sometimes it feels like the only place left in the world not trying to become Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. But the question to ask is, if we are able to replicate Silicon Valleys around the world, take the Middle East and North Africa, will that address all of our challenges? I think so that's where, again, there is still a gap, because technology itself doesn't enable or doesn't cause change. It enables change. We, the connected people, are ultimately the agents of change. And time will tell whether we're able to use that tool of technology for the betterment of humanity and our environment, or for the exacerbation of our own human flaws. So moving from just tech hubs to more purpose hubs is, I think, where the ultimate solution is. And that's crucial for parts of the world like the Middle East and North Africa.
Now, one of the unique things about Davos is that it creates this sort of cross-section between politics, business and humanitarian work. And that's something that you're particularly passionate about.
Yes, I was really humbled to sit on the UN Secretary General's high-level panel for humanitarian financing for a couple of years, really looking at both the quality and the quantity of funds towards better humanitarian outcomes. I mean, what dawned on me very early on in those discussions is how little business today contributes to, and the private sector, broadly speaking, contributes to humanitarian outcomes. I think a 2015 number, which is the latest one I have, is only 4.8% of total global humanitarian aid was contributed by businesses. And now, why is that the case? So go to the core of the challenges. One of the challenges is, whereas at the turn of the century, humanitarian crises were fairly evenly split between natural disasters and human conflict. Today, the vast majority, over 80%, is human conflict.
So what's next?
Now, human
Sports
conflict
or,
comes with its
press
fair
review?
share of putrid politics, and businesses like to try and stay, and perhaps smartly so, on the sidelines of those politics. And you see that in the Middle East with crises such as Syria and Yemen. So I think there needs to be better communication between policymakers and indeed businesses on how to engage and how not to engage in economic crises. And the next one, which I think is a broad topic, but again, a lot of room for improvement, is moving the narrative of business engagement and humanitarian outcomes from donations and philanthropy into really investments in resilience, and for businesses to really ultimately realize that it's in their enlightened self-interest to invest early in trying to build resilience within these communities to avoid challenges and ultimately much greater cost going down the road. So I'm encouraged to see that now, I think this is the third Davos that I've been to over the last, this is my 9th Davos, but this is the third Davos I've been to where humanitarian sort of objectives is really core and central to the various programs to have that sort of cross-stakeholder approach and discussion.
Badr Jafar, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for now. Thank you so much. We'll wrap it up. We'll be back with all the latest events from Davos throughout the day and for the rest of the week. Back to you, Jeannie.
Thanks for that. That was Kate Moody there reporting from Davos. It's now